Hi there, Meaghan. How are you today?
I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Doing well.
Dealing with some technical issues, but having a great night. What can we do for you tonight?
So I have had some friends that I've known for like 30 years who have transitioned in like the last 5 years. And because I've known them for so long under a different set of pronouns, it's been really difficult for me to get into a place where it's like natural to use their new pronouns and their new names. And so I mean, they're great. Like they know that I'm trying and they don't get mad at me. But I was wondering if there were any other sort of like ways to work on it. And it's also been hard because like trying to talk about these old friends with my parents particularly has been difficult pronoun-wise. It's not a big thing, but, you know, I want to like respect them in all areas of my life and not just when I'm around them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a great question.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I would say first and foremost that, you know, you're right. Like, it sounds like your friends aren't necessarily miffed by this. And that's an important place to start, an important thing for folks to remember that using the proper pronouns, using the proper name, all of these things are very important. They're how we show respect for one another. At the same time, though I'm not myself a member of the trans community, every interaction I've had with somebody in that group speaks very comfortably and openly and warmly about those types of missteps, those types of accidental slips of the tongue. It definitely is a microaggression. It can be very painful. It can add up in some meaningful ways, but generally it's going to be viewed as just a slip of the tongue. It's very different and shouldn't be conflated with somebody who refuses to use the right terminology and who does that in a very hurtful and meaningfully aggressive way. That being said, it can be a real challenge. I know that it took me a couple of years, honestly, in my professional writing to get to the point where I was consistently using gender-neutral pronouns. That's not necessarily a goal that everybody should strive for, but it's a challenge I set for myself. And one way that I wanted to make sure that I was being mindful of my pronoun usage was to just change everything, no matter if somebody was cis or trans, if I knew their gender identity or I didn't know their gender identity. I started using generic pronouns in all my professional writing. And honestly, that took a couple of years to start to feel natural, to the point where I now write everything that way. And it can kind of confuse people or throw people off, or they think that I'm insinuating something when I'm really not. It's just that's sort of the switch that I flipped in my brain, and it took some effort to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm doing in the middle of the same thing right now. And even like with myself, because I am also NB. And so I don't have any preferred pronouns. Like anything and everything applies to me. As long as I know that you're talking to me, I'll respond and be fine. But even with myself, that's a thing where I'll like talk about myself. I'll say this girl, and I'm like this person. You know, so it's tricky for sure to flip that switch. But again, like as long as you aren't doing it intentionally and are making that effort. And B, also another thing is not to make it about you necessarily, because I know some people will like, if they mess up somebody's pronouns by accident, they will then, overreact, be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm such a horrible person, and then have the other person have to, comfort them for messing up. Not saying that's what you're doing at all, Meaghan, but some people do. So yeah, as long as you're like, oh, you know what? Whoops, I'll do better next time, I promise.
Yeah, and something else I would point out, I'm sorry to step on everybody, I just wanted to mention, you talked about when you're speaking to your folks or like maybe people who knew them from the past, and I would just say, it's generally, I mean, everybody has the right to make their own choices on this, but it's generally perfectly acceptable and part of our culture to use current nomenclature when you're talking about somebody's past. When somebody changes their name, when we talk about, Hillary Clinton, where Hillary Clinton went to college, very few people are sitting there going, well, actually, when she graduated from college, her name wasn't Hillary Clinton. we just sort of accept that when we're referring to somebody's past, that we can use the current terminology to describe them appropriately. We recognize perhaps that that's who they always were, or in other instances that that's just a change that they made, but socially that's still acceptable. So when people bend themselves over backwards and get themselves all confused by trying to make sure that, every time I mention this person pre-2004, I use one term, and post-2000, it's not necessary, it's not helpful, and it's not something we do in any other part of our lives. So I would really encourage people to not stress about that.
Also, just, for consideration, again, I don't know if this is your situation with your friends, but it could also be that they're not out to everybody or don't want to be out to everybody. And in that case, using the pronouns they used to go by with people whom they aren't out yet to probably is something to talk about with them first, of course, but I generally will do that if I don't know for sure if they have come out to, the rest of my circle.
Mm-hmm.
In my specific circumstance, I know that they are out to everybody, so
okay,
that's
good.
not something to worry about. Kind of related, one of my parents are divorced, and one of my parents is married to somebody who is trans, and the circumstances surrounding their relationship and the dissolution of my parents' relationship is sort of also part of my personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't bring it up with a lot of people because their situation isn't my situation to share, I feel like it touches on me a little bit, and in certain kind of private circumstances where there's something going on where it seems relevant, it's not inappropriate to discuss that. But am I just way off base?
No, I would definitely agree. When you're telling your story, I think that you actually have a right to tell it sort of your way, and to express, if this is somebody who you thought of as a father or a father figure who identifies now as a woman, if you thought of them as a man back when this story takes place, I do think that that's relevant. I think you have freedom to discuss that and to communicate that in any way that feels appropriate. That's not to say that they were X, Y, or Z, but when you're telling the story, you're always telling it from your point of view. So you're discussing, my experience was X, Y, or Z, and I think that you do have the right to do that.
There's a beautiful TED Talk about something very similar. And I'm going to see if I can find it and then post it in the comments for you, because I think that, the way that she had talked about her story with her now wife was absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe take a look at that and, I don't know, go from there.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, and
thank you.
I just want to thank you for calling and let you know that, this may be a kind of smaller issue in some ways, but I also think it's an incredibly vital one. And so I really appreciate you taking that time and taking this very seriously. You're already doing the important thing, which is giving a shit in the first place. So you got that down. The rest of it will fall into place.
Sweet. Steps to progress.
Well, thank you so much. You have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really does feel like the important thing for me is the effort and the kindness behind it, the semantics and the particulars. Maybe that's a convenient place for me to be, sitting here with the privileges that I have. And, I'm open to being challenged on that. But I think that generally when people see the kindness in your heart, the effort that you're making, that's the significant aspect, not the individual words that you use.
Right. And those words can hurt or have a negative effect on people. And certainly I'm not downplaying that at all.
Sure.